Well, welcome back. This is the final installment of Fireside Chats and Readings with the Dean, and you got me again. And you'll see that I'm in my robe, and I have bought an ascot to go along with the robe this week instead of my tie, so that the feeling of this whole thing would be complete. So, for my final reading to share with you, I've chosen to write a new story to share with you. And so here is what it is. So let me tell you what I've got to share with you this week. This is a story that I made up called The Thicket. Several weeks ago, I recounted the almost entirely inaccurate story of how the Boar's Head Dinner came to the University of Rochester campus. Today, I return to tell the almost entirely untruthful account of yet another dear campus tradition. Full many fair and famous dreams beneath the sun there be. You will no doubt recognize these words as the first line of our beloved Alma Mater, the Genesee. But as familiar as these words are to us, they leave us with many questions. Why is it that we only sing 2 of the 3 verses? There have been many explanations offered, but none have fully explained it. How is it that the Alma Mater was written about our college home beside the Genesee, when it was written during the time that the university resided on the Prince Street campus, miles away from the banks of the river? And how is it that the Alma Mater, written by a member of the class of 1892, was put to music by a seemingly unrelated member of the class of 1866? These and other questions will finally be answered as we embark upon another journey into misinformed Melihora. I can assure you that while I spent exceedingly little time in researching the tale of the Boar's Head Dinner at the university, I have spent even less time researching the facts in today's story. Well, we must start, of course, with Thomas Thackeray Swinburne, class of 1892. Born in Rochester in 1865, just days after the end of the American Civil War, Swinburne joined the university, of course, in the fall of 1888. And he studied at the Prince Street campus. He quickly gained a reputation as a great writer of poetry. He was also known as a person who loved to take long walks to think and to attain inspiration for his poetry. It is because of this that we are led to one fateful day in the life of Thomas Swinburne and the history of the University of Rochester. Thomas had several preferred routes for his frequent constitutionals, one of which led him miles away from the university's campus to a site beside the Genesee River. It was here that Thomas wrote much of his poetry. In order to get to this site, however, Thomas had to take a roundabout route in order to avoid a difficult-to-navigate thicket next to a large field which was known to house many bees' nests. Others who had tried to take the shortcut warned of its dangers, so Thomas duly avoided the area. This site was, of course, the future home of the Oak Hill Country Club, which would be founded upon this land in 1901, and then later to become the home of the University of Rochester's River campus. The area of the thicket was approximately between where Wilson Commons is now and the Gergen Athletic Center. At the time, of course, Thomas Swinburne had no idea that this was to be the case. He simply enjoyed sitting next to the river on a flat rock, composing his poetry. Well, one fine spring moment in 1893, Thomas headed out to his favorite spot by the river and felt especially inspired to write a poem about the river and about the college, and about how thankful he was that he could take the time to write about both, which were very dear to him. He thought about how, just down the river a bit, lay several waterfalls, and how the river advances toward them with force And how about life is like that sometimes, that knowledge and experience hopefully allow each of us to become stronger if we let them. This, of course, was the beginning of his writing the Genesee. He had written 2 verses when he realized it was time to get back to the campus. He was going to be late for class. Anxious to get back on time, he decided that he would take the shortcut, despite the warnings. Running through the field, which was by then filled with yellow dandelions, he discovered that he did indeed disturb many bees, and by the time he got to the thicket, several were angered enough to follow him. Rushing through the thicket as fast as he could, Thomas scratched himself on the many branches he had to run through, and at one point disturbed a nest, causing a swarm of bees to follow him. Unfortunately for poor Thomas, he sustained several stings before he made it to a safe enough distance for him to slow down. He much regretted this shortcut during the painful walk back to campus, where he just barely made it back in time for his class, and he really wasn't paying attention much at all. The stings were swelling up a bit, and the pain was dreadful. Right after class, he sought out a friend of his, Melchiorus No Existi Eora, grandfather to Simon Eora of the Boar's Head Tale, but that's a different story, who was studying in the Prince Street campus's Sibley Library. Interesting story here about the library. The library had opened in 1877 as the first fireproof building due to a space in its construction between the limestone exterior and the brick interior. It was flanked by 2 sphinxes and contained 6 muses, statues of women, representing various areas of study in niches along its exterior. When it was raised in 1968, 4 of the muses in good enough shape were saved, and in 1980, installed in the area between Meliora Hall and Rusheries. One of the statues, Industry, or Commerce, depending on who you ask, was given to a faculty member and was located near Toronto, Canada, until 2013, when it was returned to the university. The 2 sphinxes from Sibley Library can be seen today at Wilson Quad entrance between Lattimore and Morey Halls. This is a true story. At any rate, Thomas found Melchiorus and told him about his ordeal with the bees. Melchiorus, who studied entomology, was quick to point out to Thomas that he was not stung by bees at all, but by a type of wasp known as a yellow jacket. Well, Thomas replied, well, whatever they were, their sting hurts. If only the sting of our sports teams hurts so much. Melchiorus paused and thought of that for a moment. I'll come back to that later, he said to himself. But the thought was lost until decades later. Howard Garnish of the class of 1927 would, during a game in 1925, shout out to his yellow-clad team members during a game, "Go, you Yellow Jackets!" These words proved to be inspirational, and Garnish's quote can be seen recognized on a banner in Wilson Commons today. Who can say for certain that Thomas Swinburne's words in 1893 left an impression that rippled into Garnish's outburst? We'll never know. Melchiorus took Thomas back to his room and looked at Thomas's stings. "They aren't so bad," he said. "But why did you cut through the thicket? Everyone knows to avoid it." Thomas explained about the verses he wrote while sitting on the rock beside the river. Melchiorus asked to see them, but Thomas refused, stating that he didn't think the poem was quite done yet. He would show him once the poem had been composed in its completion. Melchiorus, needing to go to class anyways, asked to see it once it was complete. Thomas agreed. Back to his room Thomas went. As he sat at his desk, pain still throbbing from the stings, he attempted to finish the poem and wrote a 3rd verse. Meanwhile, Melchiorus was speaking with several classmates in the library after his class. and he was talking about Thomas's flight through the thicket. "Poor guy," a student commented. "That field is bright yellow with dandelions this time of year." "Yes," commented another. "It's an astonishing color." Well, this comment happened to be overheard by an alumnus who was walking through the library at the time. You see, the university had gone through various colors in establishing what the official colors were to be, from magenta and white to blue and gray, and they were currently considering replacing the dull gray with a more vibrant color. The overheard conversation prompted the alumnus to suggest that the color of the dandelions, yellow, replace the gray at a meeting of the Alumni Association. And in the June of 1893, at a meeting of the Alumni Association, dandelion yellow was chosen as the university's color along with the blue. A few days later, Thomas took his poem to Melchiorus and shared the completed version. "That last verse," Melchiorus said, "seems to fit better as a second verse." Thomas agreed. "It reads as a song," Thomas noted, "but I have no music for it." It just so happened that both Thomas and Melchiorus knew of another alumnus, Herb Dwight Wilkins, from the class of 1866, who was a noted musician in the Rochester area, and they decided that they would ask him for help. "Yes," said Mr. Wilkins, "it certainly does seem appropriate as a song." As he was reading it over, his memory of an old English sea chanty called The Pilot came to mind, and he set to the task of adapting the poem to the melody of that song. In that moment, the Genesee, Mr. Wilkins was never a fan of the second verse, believing it was a far better song if the second verse were simply left out, and whenever it was sung, he just instructed others to leave it out. For that reason, and to this day, our Alma Mater is sung without its second verse. It was not, as some have suggested, because of a cold winter football game, when the band conductor left out the second verse, for who would know which verse was left out when the song was played by a band without lyrics? But it was because of the opinion of one person, which is, after all, how such things start and are then perpetuated. You may think that this brings us to the end of our story. Now that we know the origins of the Alma Mater, the seed that was planted about why we are Yellow Jackets, how we have come to declare dandelion yellow as our official school color, and why we only sing the first and third verses of the Genesee. But no, for there is yet one more legend to be explained as a result of Thomas Swinburne's foray through the thicket, and that is this. Upon the very spot where Thomas fled through the thicket and was stung by Yellow Jackets stands a clock. The dandelion clock, or tower clock, stands upon this very place, between Wilson Commons and the Gergen Athletic Center. And you see, Thomas Swinburne, class of 1892, who in 1893 was still taking classes, never graduated. That is, indeed, a fact. And that explains a very different legend about why those who pass under this clock suffer a similar fate. So take care, students at the University of Rochester. Don't tempt fate. I hope this story answers the many questions you have about various traditions and aspects of the University of Rochester history that you've wanted to be explained. I will remind you again, however, that while some of this is true, much of it, probably most of it, is not. I'll leave it to you to decide which is which. I hope you've enjoyed this latest installment of Misinformed Meliora. As the very strange and unprecedented spring 2020 semester draws to a close, I wish you all the best. I hope you are all well. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I hope you're staying safe and at home to the extent that you can, and I hope to see you all again, healthy, smiling, and happy to see this thing pass. I so very much miss you all. Until we meet again, Meliora.